Say what you will about this movie, it's actually kind of thought provoking. It makes you ask all kinds of questions, like, where the fuck is Paul? Welcome to another horror franchise Wednesday. I did the first one last week. If you haven't checked that review out, I'll leave a card up here so you can watch that. I go way in depth, and I will be doing that again, as always. Long reviews, as to be expected. I got my Pamela Voorhees shirt on. Unfortunately, it's a little bit green, so it's probably gonna, interfere with my green screen. It's probably gonna be a hole right in my chest. Hopefully not. I hope not. But yeah, I had to wear the shirt for the movie, right? Makes sense. Got it from Gutter Garbs, I think. Guttergarbs.com. Check them out. So, as always, I will be doing facts first. I will be doing some trivia, and then I will get into my pros and cons. I will let you know where the review actually starts in the comments below. So, if you don't want to hear all my rambling about the behind the scenes and trivia, you can just fast forward. Now, let's get into Friday the 13th Part 2, which came out in 1981. It started shooting like 4 months later in Kent, Connecticut. The first one took place in New Jersey. This one takes place in New Jersey too, but this one was shot in Connecticut, so that's different. And then we got Steve Miner, who was just, working for Sean Cunningham in the first one as like an assistant. He was like a protege studying Sean, wanting to become a director. And now this was his first directing job. And some people think that his direction's actually better than Sean Cunningham. Tom Savini did not come back. Sean S. Cunningham did not come back. Victor Miller did not come back. The writer of this one was Ron Kurz, who was an uncredited writer of the first one, who did like a redraft, rewrite. And they did not come back because they did not like the idea of Jason. They wanted, if anything, for this franchise to be an anthology, where kind of like Halloween 3, where every year they would just say Friday the 13th, Season of the Witch, have a different story just based on the date of Friday the 13th. And I find it very convenient that this movie takes place on Friday the 13th, 5 years later, and it just so happens to be Jason's birthday, the day they open up camp again, like next door. It's just a little convenience, but I have to point it out now that I'm thinking about it. But anyways, yeah, back to the facts. Let's get back on track. So yeah, they were like, Jason, stupid idea. It totally takes away from the motivation, the reasoning, the logic of the first one. It just ruins it. It's like, okay, why would Pamela be murdering people for someone who didn't actually drown? It makes no sense. Where was he? Was he living off the land? For some, he was just too stupid to like say, "Hey, I'm over here." He's not mute. He can talk. We hear him talk in Pamela's vision of Jason drowning. He's like, "Help, mommy, help! I'm drowning." He can talk, but for some reason in this one he can't. He just chooses to be silent. I think that was more of a directing approach, a writing approach. Like, let's make him a scary mute killer, because after all, we are trying to rip off Halloween, and Michael Myers is mute as well. So it makes sense that he's not talking. People like that silent killer, and I'm a fan of it too. But it just doesn't make sense. Like, he talks as a kid. Now he doesn't, but then again, Michael Myers, he didn't. He did talk as a kid, and then he didn't. But anyways, yeah, Steve Miner, he directed this. This was his first film, and this is edited by Sean Cunningham's wife. So Sean didn't come back, but his wife at least did. And the idea of Jason's like mask and whatnot, the pillowcase, I don't think they were purposely trying to rip off the town that dreaded sundown. It was just an easy thing. Like, what would he wear? What would this guy grab real quick out of the cabins to put on his face? A pillowcase. And apparently that idea came from a costume designer who is actually the first person to play Jason in this movie. In the opening shot where you got the kid singing Itsy Bitsy Spider, and then you see like the Jason legs walk into frame. It's a costume designer, a woman. So a woman played Jason first in this movie. I thought that was a very interesting fact. I'm kind of glad that Tom Savini did turn down this job, because what did he do instead? He made The Burning in 1981, and that has way more gore than this. I don't know how. This one is tame and cut. I thought the first one was tame. This is cut. This movie had over 48 seconds of gore taken away. That's not a whole lot of time, but film-wise and gore-wise, that's a lot. Could you imagine if they added 3 to 5 seconds to each death in this movie? It would go up a lot. So it's just a shame that this had to happen, and apparently it was because the first one got away with too much, and everybody complained, like, what the hell? We got to see a throat get slit, a head chopped off. In the next movie, cut that shit out. And that's what they did. They totally fucked this movie just because the first one got away with too much. Then we get the infamous opening kill. It's a trend that was probably started here. And there's so many movies I could list where it's like the survivor of the previous film gets killed in the next one. And I think it probably all started here, and this whole opening kill was improvised. Like, Adrienne King came back. She didn't want to do too much. She said she didn't want to be in the movie full time. Like, the entire runtime, she was dealing with a stalker. She was scared for her life, so she just wanted a quick role. She shot for 2 days, and it was the opening scene. And apparently, she said when she went there, she had no idea that her character was dying. But if you're only going to make a movie for 2 days, what did you expect? They're going to kill you off. And she had to improvise, apparently, everything she says in that opening scene. She's walking around in the world's ugliest outfit ever. She takes a 10-second shower, and then she has this improvised phone call, and it's just one long tracking shot. You could tell it was just like, all right, let's just get this done. And then she gets killed, and she had no idea it was about to happen. And then they stick the thing in her head, and apparently the prop wasn't even working on set that day. So when they stab her in the head, it actually, like, hit her temple. It didn't stab her, but it hurt her. Now, when Tom Savini declined to do this movie, they went to Stan Winston, and he turned it down for something else. I don't know what it was. Maybe The Thing, because that came out in 82, right? I don't know. He worked on The Thing after this, but we got Carl Fullerton or something, and he came up with the Jason look, and he made it in like 2 seconds. And I'm not a fan of the Jason look in this movie. Saying it right now, I'm not a fan of it. Speaking of Jason, the guy who was hired to play him was a guy who originally auditioned to play Paul, but he had some, history in stunt school. He was probably just fresh out of stunt school, and they just said, you want to play Jason? And he did the ending scene where he jumps out through the window, Warrington Gillette, and apparently he just kept getting hurt. He didn't like it, so he just went away, and they had Steve Dash, who recently died, rest in peace, do basically the rest of the film. I think there's one other guy, I don't know his name right now, but Steve Dash is the main guy that hardcore fans now give credit to for being Jason in this movie. Steve Dash is the one that you see throughout most of it. And at the end, Steve Dash, when he's fighting Jenny, she brings down the machete or whatnot, hits his finger, and it actually cut his finger open, and ironically got 13 stitches. Mark is a cool character in this movie, and unfortunately for the girl who's in love with him in this movie, Vicky, in real life, she actually had a crush on him, but unfortunately for her, he was gay, and he died of AIDS like a decade or so later in the 90s. Now let's talk about Jeff and Sandra. She was 17, she was underage, and we actually had a lot more nudity than this movie already did. With the skinny dipping, this one has more than part 1. But we were going to have full frontal with Sandra's character, but Paramount found out she was 17, she was underage, and they had to cut it all out. And you can tell when it just hard cuts to them done, like they're about to have sex, and it completely cuts away, and then it cuts back minutes later, and they're done. You can just tell this movie was very choppy and cut to pieces, and it's a shame. But yeah, they didn't know she was underage, so they cut that out. And then another thing that was cut out was the kill. A kill that was borrowed from Twitch of the Death Nerve, Bay of Blood. It has the same kill in that movie. 2 people on top of each other getting stabbed with a spear. They made 2 giant fake bodies to stab on camera, and it's all cut out. You can probably find stills of it on the internet if you Google search it, but unfortunately, we will probably never get it back. One interesting little fact in this movie is that there's a cop who apparently had never driven before, and his character drives, so this was the first time he had ever driven, was on this movie. But I find it very funny that there's a cop in this movie who gets killed with a hammer to the back of the head, and there's a cop in Halloween 2, which came out the same year, who gets killed with a hammer to the back of the head. Now Jeff, who gets killed with Sandra, he actually plays an extra later on in the movie. Now when I see it, I'm like, that's Jeff! He's the one running up at the casino, restaurant, when it's the exterior shot at night and there's all the rain. There's a guy running up to the doors, and you can't tell who it is, but just know that's Jeff, who just died a minute ago in the film. Now let's talk about the death of Paul. So there's an alternate ending that we never got, but it was shot, and apparently, according to the words of Steve Miner, this ending is not a dream. He was supposed to actually jump out through that window, and there was supposed to be this fight that ensued right after, where Jason knocked out Jenny, and then he fought with Paul, and then it's implied, still ambiguous, but implied that he's dead, because then it cuts to, Pam's head on the table, and they had a different actress playing the head, and her eyes would open and smile at the camera, implying haha, Paul's dead, something like that. So Paul was dead. He is supposed to be dead according to the writing of this movie. That was the implication. It wasn't supposed to be a dream, and Paul is supposed to be, in fact, dead. But for the longest time, I've always kind of considered that it was a dream, and that Paul didn't die. He just got carted away before Jenny, and then Jenny was, taken away afterwards, and for some reason they just never told her where Paul was. But it's always been ambiguous. It's always been one of the biggest questions of this movie is where the fuck is Paul? And last but not least, this movie had a slightly bigger budget with $1 million, and it made over $20 million in the States. I'm not sure, maybe worldwide. So it didn't make quite as much as the first one, but it still made way more than what it was worth, what it cost to make. So that's why we got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, now let's get into the review itself. Friday the 13th, Part 2. Working title, Jason. This movie takes place 2 months after the events of Part 1, and then we get this opening kill, and then it takes place 5 years after the events of Part 1, so I guess it takes place in 1984, and we got these counselors going to this camp called the Napasack, something like that, Packanack? Yeah, there we go, Packanack, that's right. The Packanack Lodge, and they're going to train to be counselors, and then they get killed off one by a mysterious killer. Who could it be? Starting off, as always, with the things that I like about this movie. I like that Betsy Palmer comes back to do a little cameo, and apparently she has never seen this movie. Well, she's dead now, but she had never seen this movie. I'm not sure if that's still true. I'm not sure when that quote was taken, but I read that she had never saw it. She just went to a studio for half a day with a black screen and filmed it, and it was like, whatever, I'm done. Give me my money. But I like that she came back, just for cast continuity alone, getting Betsy Palmer to come back, and then getting Adrienne King to come back. Actually, it's not ignoring events. It's still got story continuity, even though the story doesn't make sense. How Jason's back, why, where was he? Doesn't make sense. But I like that we're still picking up after previous events in the prior film. I'm a continuity guy, so I'm going to point it out for all these movies, because for the most part, this series doesn't get enough credit for it, but there is some good continuity, especially from 3 to 4. That's a good back-to-back watch. Speaking of continuity, the whole not only the cast, but the whole crew behind the camera, Steve Miner and everybody else for every little job behind the camera, assisting director, everything. They all came back except for Steve Miner, not Steve Miner, except for Sean Cunningham, except for Victor Miller and Tom Savini. Basically, everybody came back to make this movie. So it still feels like a Friday the 13th movie. You still got the same cut to whites, the fade to whites after each kill. You got the same composer, Harry Manfredini. I like that he does the score again. He doesn't just use all the same notes from the first one. It's still got that same sound, but there's moments here and there where he kind of makes a new version of it. It sounds a little bit different, but then there's moments where you're like, that was from the first one, that musical cue. So it still has that awesome, iconic Friday the 13th score by Harry Manfredini, and I love it. I will say that the dialogue in this movie is written better than the first one. It's got the same writer as the first one, technically, Ron Kurz, who did a rewrite of the first one. The dialogue between them is a little funnier. It's a little more genuine, I guess. It just feels more authentic. There's a lot more of it than the first one. I feel like this one doesn't have the kills as quickly as the first one, but when the kills do start, it's just kill, 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 kill. Which is funny to say because these movies technically are an hour and 10 minutes. You take away the opening logo thing and all the names popping up, you take away the last 2-3 minutes of credits, you take away the recap, this is an hour and 10 minutes. So it's just funny me saying the kills don't happen quick enough. This movie's very quick. None of these movies have major pacing issues because they're so short. And Jenny, I think she's one of the best final girls in the movie. She fights back. Adrienne King playing Alice, she fought back some, but she kept throwing the weapon down. Jenny, she fights back a lot. She grabs a chainsaw. She does a wrestling move where she grabs a chair, breaks over his back, and then she does mind trickery where she puts on a sweater. She's smart. She's thinking. She's using that child psychology that she's studying in college. I like that they bring back Ralph. Going back to continuity, I like that they bring him back, and I like that he dies in this movie. Just get rid of him. There's not much you can do with that character. How many times can he come back and be like, you're doomed? I like that he dies. And he's actually the first person outside of the opening. He's the first one that dies. And I thought that was a cool, shocking kill. Oh shit, Ralph's already gone. I like that this movie has more nudity than the first one. If you're a slasher movie, you gotta have that nudity, you gotta check that box, and we get a girl skinny dipping, so that's always nice to see. And I like that in this movie, Jason's like a legend. He's a story. He's something that you talk about around a campfire. I love that scene where they're just like, I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never actually recovered from the lake, and his mom got killed, and then maybe he saw, like, maybe. It's like a question, like, did he see it? I like that. I like that you can just kind of theorize, and I like that this movie just creates questions. You can just think about it all day long and just come up with different ideas that would all make sense. Is Jason even human? Kind of is. I've always thought he's human in 2, 3, 4, but you could argue maybe he's not. Maybe he's like a Michael Myers. Maybe he's bordering between supernatural or whatnot. It seems like there's moments in this movie because of, I guess, the editing, the directing. It makes it feel like he's supernatural, like teleporting. Because there'll be like a shot where he's like stalking here and then it like cuts over here and it's like he's already stalking this. Like, I don't know. I'll get into it later. But yeah, I just like the questions that are posed. I like that he's a legend and that the legend's real. This movie's basically like a campfire story come to life. Getting into my mixed thoughts, the opening. I never thought much of the opening, but watching it this time, I'm just like, why would you bring her back? I guess it's just for shocks. I don't know if I like it or not, though. It's just the way it's done, it's weird. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. That's why it's mixed. I'm like, do I like this opening kill? Do I like that they brought back Alice just to kill her and kind of ruin that struggle and fight of survival in the first one? Like, it just ruins all that. Like, oh, it meant nothing. She's dead 2 months later. It's like, and Jason's fully grown. And, like, he was a kid at the end. If that wasn't a dream, now he's just an adult. I don't know. So, yeah, but I'm not sure how I feel about it, so I'm just going to put it right here, the opening kill. Now getting into the things that I do not care for, nitpicks and criticisms that I think are legit, is the opening recap is way too long, and apparently there are versions out there that are longer. I haven't seen them, but this one lasts like at least 5 minutes. From seeing Alice on her bed to her waking up is like 5 minutes at least. And then the whole opening scene and credits is 14 minutes. So the actual movie and story 5 years later doesn't start until like 14 minutes into the movie, and it's only an hour left at that point. So it's a very short movie. I feel like this movie tries a little too hard to build suspense, and it doesn't work as well for me in the first one. Like, I'm not scared, but I can still judge whether or not I think there's good tension. Like, I'm not scared ever, but I think I can judge whether or not there's decent tension being built. Like, if I put myself in a scaredy cat shoes, would I think this scene would work or be effective? And when I was watching this movie, I'm like, they're just trying too hard. They're throwing so many POV shots. There's so many, like, he's watching. And it gets to the point where it feels like he's teleporting because it's like, oh, here's Terry and he's watching. And then it literally will cut to the same thing, but a different person. Like, here's Jenny and he's watching, music cue. It's like, who's he watching? Who was Terry looking at? Like, where is he everywhere? Is there more than one killer? I just feel like there's way too much attempts at trying to build tension, and it doesn't work as well for me like it did in the first one. I felt like the POV shots weren't so much, and they weren't so forced in the first one. This one just is like, all right, how much Jason and POV can we shove in the, into the audience's face? Like, how many times can we cut to a POV and a tracking shot where Jason's walking, his legs, whatnot? It just feels too much. And it also makes it confusing. It's like, am I supposed to believe that they didn't see him? Like, he's just right next to the tree and they walk by and then, like, he immediately is, like, walking behind them. They don't hear him walking in the woods, stepping on twigs and leaves. Get the fuck out of here. It's like that scene, especially with Terry looking at the camera, and she looks at the camera so many times. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. Alice does it once. They break the fourth wall so many times, just staring right at the lens. And it's like, is this POV an actual POV? Is this Jason? Because if so, how does she not see him? And I do not care for the portrayal of Jason, whether it's Steve Dash or Warrington Gillette, whoever you want to give credit to. I'm not crazy about the look, and I'm not crazy about the portrayal. He's too clumsy. He keeps falling. He's on a chair. He falls down. He breaks the pitchfork. He's making dumb decisions that I will explain later on in my spoiler discussion. But he feels clumsy. And he's just like all scared when she gets the chainsaw. He's like, oh, oh, oh. I just don't like this Jason. He's not very intimidating. I find Pamela a little bit more scary because she's so psychotic. She can, because she can talk, it helps. And she just seems more scary. She's got a motive, she's got drive, and she's got energy, and she just slaps the shit out of Adrian King. I find Pamela in the first one scarier. And there's no gore in this movie whatsoever. At least the first one had gore. There's a lot of cutaway kills in the first one, but at least there's 4 kills that are gory on screen. Pamela getting her head chopped off. The throat slice is nice and bloody. Doesn't cut away so quick. You got, so on and so forth. Kevin Bacon, axe in the head, all good stuff. In this one, everything is like 2 frames or less. It just cuts away. Throat slice cuts away as soon as you see blood start to come out. The shish kebab kill cuts away. Everything is just so freaking choppy. Even like a simple like barbed wire to the throat, like it just cuts to an extreme close-up shot of Ralph's head where you can't even see what's being done beneath. So it's just such a shame that the MPAA had to ruin this movie, just like future installments. And a little nitpick would be all the plot issues. I mean, just logic issues, really, with Jason coming back, kind of ruining the whole reason and, the rhyme and reason of why Pamela was doing what she was doing the first one. It kind of just takes away from that. Like, it was all for nothing. Her son was still alive. It just raises a lot of questions. So it's a little bit of a criticism that I have to say. It's definitely a writing issue that I had with the movie. It was lazy. It's just lazy writing. There's no getting around it. They didn't care. They were just like, let's make another movie. But final thoughts, this is still a must-watch slasher movie. It's one of fans' favorite sequels in this franchise. A lot of people put it above the first one. I don't think I would. Sorry, after watching it this time, I think I flipped on it. I think I like the first one a little bit more. Am I alone? Let me know in the comments below. But it's still got, it's the introduction to Jason. It's still got, a high body count. It's still got some kills on screen, but it's very quick, a couple of frames or less. But I like the continuity, I like the score, I like Jenny as a final girl. The third act is still tense. It's got a final chase that lasts a little bit longer than the final chase in the first one. Jenny is badass, so when it comes to Friday the 13th Part 2, if you're a slasher fan and you don't have this, it is definitely worth adding to your collection, so go out and buy it. Now let's get into the spoiler discussion. So we get the opening, Itsy Bitsy Spider. This movie starts with a song, just like the first one started with Hallelujah. And we get a look of Alice's house. And here's my first question. Why is she still in New Jersey, where this is supposed to take place? She lives in California. We found that out in the first one, when she was breaking up with Steve. So why does she not go back immediately? Like, after what she went through, the first thing you would want is your family and loved ones. But she's just like, I gotta figure things out, Mom. I just gotta try to move on with my life. And it's like, you're away from home. Go home. Why are you still in New Jersey? It makes no sense. Another thing that does not make sense is how she affords that big-ass place. It almost looks like a haunted mansion. It's a huge house. It's ugly, a little dilapidated on the outside. But she's got a nice place for someone who's a no longer a working camp counselor. Another thing that does not make sense is how Jason found out where she lived if he followed her home after the events of Part 1. If he really did see his mom get decapitated and retrieve the head, which she clearly did, and the sweatshirt, so I guess, why wouldn't the police show up to the crime scene like, where's the head? And where's her sweatshirt? Why is she naked? Like, that question wasn't ever raised. I guess she had like an undershirt, but whatever. You're like, where's the head? Why wouldn't that become the lore? Like, when they're at the campfire later on, like, Jason's body was never found, or his mom's head. Like, that should be the story too. Like, and the mom's head's missing. That would be part of the canon, like the whole lore and legend. I forget where I was way before. The house, how does she afford that place? How does Jason know where she lives? Oh yeah, that's where I was. He follows her home, right? How does he know where she lives? Was there like a paper at the cabin at Camp Crystal Lake of like a list of everybody who was going to work there and where they lived? I guess maybe that explains that. So maybe he grabbed a phone book and then he learned what her phone number was, because he calls her. He clearly called her. She picks up the phone and is like, hello? No one's there? Okay, so Jason called her? Okay, sure. A little subtle thing I saw this time is that Alice still draws. We learned that she's a drawer in the first movie when she's drawing Steve Christie, and we see like little paintings everywhere. I thought that was just a nice little addition to the continuity. Like, they actually paid attention to that. So it's odd that they didn't pay attention to other stuff, but they paid attention to that. Like, she's still a drawer. She still paints. And, we get a cat scare. Come on. And a cat scare in Halloween 2, which came out the same year. So 1981 was the year of cat scares, because I think it was 81 or 82 that Slumber Party Massacre came out, and I had a cat scare too. Cat just jumps right through the fucking window, because that's what cats do, right? So dumb. And then she opens up the fridge, there's Pamela's head, and it actually looks like the head they used in part one. And then later on, when it's like, more decayed, it's a different actress's head that they made. And then Jason takes the tea thing off, the tea's like steaming, and he just takes it off the burner because he may be a murderer, but he's not an arsonist. He doesn't want that place to burn up. No, no, no. So yeah, then after that opening kill and Alice's 10-second shower scene, we get the opening logo. It just hits the screen just like in part one, and then it explodes up and up the action. It's a sequel. We gotta make it bigger and badder, so the logo explodes. And then we get this tow truck prank where they're at this telephone booth that they planted on set, and then people that weren't aware of it were trying to use this fake phone booth, and like, what the fuck's wrong with it? Which is just a funny behind the scenes story. There's a tow truck taking away Jeff's car, and it's like a monster truck too. His car is like huge. And they're taking it down the road to the prankster's house, and this prank makes no sense. Like, how did they set that up? So they were banking on the idea that Jeff and Sandra were going to stop for a payphone and directions not even a quarter mile away from the prankster's house. Like, it's right down the road. And then they were banking on the idea, hoping that they were going to chase that tow truck all the way down the road instead of just giving up and then using that payphone to call like a taxi. So it's just like, you gotta stretch disbelief in that scene. Like, okay, sure, that prank would work. Like, they just knew, like, he was waiting. That tow truck was waiting. They just knew that they were gonna stop for directions at that specific place. And then we get to the Packanack Lodge, and it's apparently next to Camp Crystal Lake. It's like right down the road, supposedly. So I guess it makes sense why Jason would be stalking that area. He's not just going to kill in his territory. He owns the whole lake. It's all his territory, no matter what camp you call it. And then we get the classic campfire story, and then the prankster pops up. This is a much better prankster than the last guy, Ned, shooting bow and arrows like a reckless moron. And what I find interesting about this prankster is that he lives. The body count could have been way higher. There's a moment in this movie where all the potential victims could have been killed, but they leave. There's like, who wants to go to the town for the night? And then like 8 or 10 people leave. And like, as the audience, you're like, no, that could have been more kills, because that's what we're here to see. And it's like, damn it. The prankster lives, and he's like out drinking, he's trying to hit on women and get laid. He's the guy that lives. I just thought that was very interesting. And then we get another scenario where the final girl is banging the leader. Like in the first one, we got Alice banging Steve, the leader. In this one, Jenny is clearly banging Paul. And I guess Jenny's on her period because of the beware of bears thing. She's like, I need to tell you something. And then they have sex, supposedly, and it cuts to the next morning. He writes, beware of bears on her mirror. So I guess she's on her period, because some people thought she was pregnant, but I think she's just on her period. That's how I saw that. And then we get this funny cut where we see the muffin dog, the Shih Tzu, and it just cuts to actual like hot dogs on a grill. It's like this is the funniest cut in the movie. How funny. And then Terry is the character I was talking about earlier. She looks at the camera so much. She's looking at the camera like, is that Jason in the woods? Like, she sees something, and then later on, she's skinny dipping, and then when she goes to get her clothes, she, like, runs into the camera, she throws a towel at the camera, and then when she's, like, in her cabin, she, like, disappears off, like, below frame, and then she pops back up, looking right at the camera, and then when she goes to run back to Scott, she runs into the camera again, and then when she sees Scott's body, and he sees that he's dead, she turns around, screams at the camera, and dies again. It's like she bumps into that camera, looks at it, throws shit at it, like 5-6 times right before she dies. But I do like that we get to see her skinny dipping. I don't know why she would want to do that. Maybe there was some cabin in the woods scenario going on. Somebody released a mist, and she was like, I want to go skinny dipping all of a sudden. And then we see this shanty shack that's like built in the middle of the woods, like in between Camp Crystal Lake and the Packanack Lodge. Did Jason build that, or was it just already there? I think maybe he built it. I mean, he's had over 20, 30 years to build it by now, because it's been a while since he drowned. So I guess he's had time. But really? Like, there's a toilet in there? Like, there's no plumbing. There's no fucking way there's plumbing with that toilet. But it looked like there was water in it. So Jason's shitting, right? Why would he steal a toilet and install it if he's not going to use it. So he's human, right? There's your evidence. That is the biggest piece of evidence in this whole movie, that Jason is in fact human, because he shits. And then we get this interesting dynamic with like Vicky and Mark. You know, he doesn't really notice how strong she's coming onto him, but then like he kind of is like, oh, I think this girl likes me. And this cabin is not very handicap friendly, I'll say that. I didn't see any wheelchair ramps anywhere, so I'm not sure how Mark's getting around. Especially when you see all those stairs, like how did he get there? But yeah, she's like so forward, and I like that. It's just funny. Like she's like, I don't want your hand, I want your fingers or something like that. And then he's like, what are we playing for? Money? And she's like, no, position. I want to play for position. Like she's gonna bang him, and she's like asking if his dick works. Like, is everything working down there? You know what's? And yeah, so she's very forward. And apparently that actress on set, they were like playing pranks on her all the time. Some of the other actors that were actually like spending the night at the cabin on set, they would actually sleep there. So yeah, and she really is a scaredy cat. They said that she would like freeze up, and that's what her character does. When she dies in this movie, it's one of the worst kills because you're just yelling at the screen. She just sits there and she takes it like a little bitch. She's just like, I know you're scared, but do something. Like, I'm not gonna root for you at all. I'm not gonna care if you die because you clearly deserve it now. You're not doing shit. You're not fighting. You're not being the final girl. But I do like she sprays perfume on her crotch. I thought that was funny. She goes to change sweaters for some reason, as if her last outfit didn't look good enough, and she sprays perfume right down her crotch. Now, there's a moment in this movie, a line of dialogue, that ages the film because Ginny calls Jason a frightened retard. Can't say that no more. And then we get the infamous Mark kill, where he's in his wheelchair on the patio. He's like, Vicky, you're out there? And then, boom! The back of the machete hits him in the head. It looks like the back, and there's a couple of moments in this movie also outside of this kill where it looks like the back of the machete is like cutting the guy's throat. It's very odd just the way they framed it. Like the angle, it's like, is it the back or the front that's cutting his throat? But he like clearly gets hit in the face with the back of the machete, proving how strong Jason really is. And then he just falls down like a short flight of steps, turns around, and then falls down like a ginormous side of steps that came out of nowhere. I bet that was like a whole different location, because there was no shot in the movie where they're walking around the cabin and you see those stairs. There's no like foreshadowing of those stairs earlier in the movie. You're like, where did these stairs come from? In the last movie, we had a couple that got killed after having sex. They split up and get killed. In this one, we got a couple that gets killed during sex. The shish kebab kill. They get stabbed with the spear, so I guess that prankster brought a real spear to the place. And honestly, maybe Jason should have used that mask he brought instead of the pillowcase. It would have been interesting just to see like if he like took his bag off and then grabbed the prankster Ted's mask instead. I like that shot of like the body being dragged down the stairs. Vicky's body's getting dragged away because Jason, just like his mom, likes to put bodies everywhere. He puts Ralph in the pantry. And one thing I just thought of, he was hiding in the pantry in the first one, and now he's dead in the pantry in this one. But yeah, he's dragging her body down the stairs, and she's like all bloodied. And then Paul and Ginny arrive right after that, like, or immediately right after that, because they like hard cuts. Right after the stair shot, they enter right there. There's the stairs. No blood. No blood on the stairs at all. That's bullshit. But then they go upstairs, they see the bloody bed, which is kind of like a callback to the first one with the bloody axe on the bed. And then, Paul, there's someone in this fucking room. And then she just sits there. This is the only thing that kind of like, I don't know, just, I want to say like ruins her credibility as the best final girl, but close. But then we get the final chase. You know, she runs into this room, she locks it, it's very tense, she's just hiding, and then he breaks through the window, and then she runs out, she gets in the car, he grabs a pitchfork from who knows where, and then instead of stabbing the driver's side where she is sitting, he stabs the passenger side so he can like reach and try to grab her. Like, why? And then like when he's on the side of the car, he doesn't like break through the window. He goes underneath the car and then like jumps on top and then he stabs. Like, Jason's making weird decisions that I don't get in this movie. And then she kicks him right in the balls. And apparently she really did kick him in the balls. Steve Dash, right in the balls. And then, you know, she's running through the woods. And then she's hiding into the cat. She runs to the cabin. She's hiding underneath the bed. There's a rat. And for some reason, there's people out there that think the rat's pissing. But I think she's pissing because there's way too much piss. And it's at the bottom of the bed, not at the top. Although she doesn't have pissed jeans after that scene, so it doesn't make sense. But it was her peeing. It had to be. It was not the rat. But I do find it funny that a serial killer is chasing her, and she doesn't piss ever until a rat comes near her, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And then, clumsy Jason falls off the chair, breaks the pitchfork. She knocks him down, grabs a chainsaw, hits him in the arm, and there's like a spark. I'm not sure if you ever caught this, but it looks like it sparks right off his arm. It hits him right in the arm, sparks, cuts off. So he stopped the chainsaw, or it just conveniently stopped at that moment when she hit him. So, I don't know. Jason's just lucky, I guess, or his arm is so powerful it stops chainsaws. But yeah, then she runs away. She runs to that cabin, the shanty shack that he built. And I like that when she sees that ugly place that looks like no one would actually live there, she's like, oh my god, help, someone inside. It's like, who do you think lives there? Maybe it's the hillbilly, overalls, baghead wearing guy who's chasing you. Like, you don't, like, come on, really? But anyways, yeah, she breaks in, and then she, goes into the Pamela room, and for some reason, Jason has, this barricade system where you put a log on so you can't open the door. Why did he put that in there? If it's just his place, why would he plan for locking the door? Why would Jason have that? That doesn't make sense. And then we see Terry's body. So he dragged Terry's body and the cop's body to Pam, the head. But then there's a third body, and I never noticed this before. There's a third body right in front, and it's a full skeleton. It's a rotted body. Is that Alice? Because it is 5 years later. But why is she more decayed than Pamela's face? Pamela still has skin. It's just all rotted. So is he embalming her? What's he doing to keep her head, still fully fleshed? There's still meat there. Her face would be a skeleton by now, but whatever. Looking past that, who is that body? Is that Alice? But then we get the final fight. She's fighting Jason. Paul comes to help her for a little bit, and then she hits him in the shoulder with the machete. And I always point this out. Why is it that in these movies, whether it's action or horror, where somebody sneaks up on the other person, and instead of stabbing them or, slicing at them at a critical spot, whether it's the back of the head, stab, heart, something, they always go for the shoulder. I don't get it. Why would you do that? Makes no sense. Stabs them in the shoulder, they walk off. And one little theory I came up with while watching this is that if you want to think that this ending is a dream sequence, the only moment where she could have fell asleep is when he's carrying her to the cabin. That's the only moment where she could have fell asleep. But now I don't think it is a dream sequence. I think Jason busted through, knocked her out, killed Paul, and then didn't realize that Jenny wasn't dead and left her alone. But in my third review, I will get into why that doesn't make sense. Why he was there, all right? I'll explain later on. Just the way part 3 opens, it completely ruins that theory of the ending of this. Jason jumping out the window with the machete still in his shoulder, no bag on his head because they took it off to look at his face and say, "You one ugly motherfucker," like Dutch. They didn't say that, but you know that. But the machete's still there. It just ruins that. It's okay, well, that theory's out the window if we take part 3 into canon. I would like to point out, how did Jason get so many candles? Is he stealing them? Is he making them? There's so many candles around Pamela's head. And then, Muffin's still alive. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going off of memory here. Muffin has a bow on her head, or his head, doesn't matter. It's blue, right? It's blue at the beginning, right before it gets killed, if that even was the dog's body that we see. And then at the end, when it comes through the door, and they're like, "Oh, Muffin, come here, sweetheart," it's purple, right? The color changes. I swear to God it does. But yeah, I kind of quickly, I skipped over the whole iconic scene, Jason, mother's talking to you. But we all know about that scene. But then the movie ends with, where's Paul? Where is he? We don't know, because the movie's ending was completely changed. So now it's ambiguous. What the fuck happened? And it just ends with Pamela's head, zooms in, and her eyes were supposed to open and smile, but that got cut out because they thought it was too cheesy. And now it's over. So that's the end of the movie. Now let's get into the Mr. Hat Awards ceremony. My favorite character in this movie is Mark. I didn't really like any of these characters all that much, but Mark is the nicest guy of them all. And the Mr. Hanky Award for Worst Actor, not character this time, is Sandra. I thought she was the weakest of them all. And the Hottest Chick Award for Prettiest Lady in this movie will be Vicky. I just like how forward she is, and she just seems like a nice gal. And the Funny Bone Award for funniest moment in the movie is the tow truck prank when Jeff's banging on the window, "Hey, asshole, that's my truck!" And the best shot in this movie is the shot of Jason running towards the shanty that Ginny is in. It's so subtle, it's such a subtle scare in the background, and I love it. And the Clap Award for best scene will go to Ginny putting on the sweater and tricking Jason into thinking that she's the mother. I like seeing Betsy Palmer back as Mrs. Voorhees. And the Mr. Hat Award for best kill will go to Mark, who gets the machete, the back of it, to his face and falls down the flight of stairs. It's mean, it's brutal, and I love it. And the Mr. Twig Award for worst kill will go to Vicky, Mark's girlfriend, who just sits there and takes it. It's so annoying. And those are my thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 2. Let me know what you thought about this movie in the comments below. Do you prefer it over 1, or are you in the minority like me? Although Rotten Tomatoes agrees with me, although I don't always agree with them. They think Part 1's better. Which one do you like better, 1 or 2? Let me know. And if you like what you see, you can hit this like button, share all your friends, and you can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month to support this channel and request movie reviews. And you can become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And until next time, auf Wiedersehen.